I never intended to go to war with the Homeowners Association, HOA, in my neighborhood. I enjoyed the quiet, sipping my morning coffee on the porch, watching the sun slowly rise over the horizon. After years as a police chief, I had learned to appreciate these simple moments of peace. But in this neighborhood, where the HOA operated like a bizarre little dictatorship, peace was a fleeting luxury. This morning, as I sipped my bitter coffee and let its aroma drift through the crisp air, I noticed a group of people standing outside my house. They wore navy blue polo shirts, each embroidered with the HOA logo on the left chest. Some had toy walkie-talkies clipped to their belts, while others held notebooks, resembling a group of children playing cops and robbers. Leading the pack was a woman in her 50s with a short, overprocessed blonde haircut and makeup applied so thickly she resembled a wax figure. Arms crossed, she radiated an air of self-importance and unchecked authority. I had heard the neighbors call her Karen, and I instantly knew this was not going to be a peaceful morning. Karen took a step forward, lifting her chin in defiance. "Sir, you are in violation of multiple HOA regulations, and we are here to address the issue." I raised an eyebrow, taking another sip of coffee. "Oh, and what exactly did I violate?" A portly man in the group flipped open a notebook, cleared his throat as if preparing to deliver a court ruling, and began reading. "First, you painted your front door without HOA approval. Second, you parked an unregistered vehicle in a designated area. Third, you have repeatedly refused to attend mandatory HOA meetings. And lastly, you have exhibited conduct deemed inappropriate for the community." I chuckled, setting my coffee cup down on the railing. "My door is the same color it's always been. My car has valid plates. I don't recall signing any contract that forces me to attend HOA meetings. And as for inappropriate conduct, it's amusing to hear that from a group of people standing outside my house, dressed like police officers, yet having no real authority whatsoever." Karen inhaled sharply, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. "We have the right to enforce community regulations. If you refuse to comply, we may have to take more serious measures." I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. "Oh, and what exactly do you plan to do?" The portly man coughed, then suddenly pulled out a pair of plastic handcuffs, the kind you'd find in a child's toy set. I nearly spat out my coffee. "Under HOA law, we have the right to perform a citizen's arrest on those who defy the rules," Karen declared, her voice full of self-satisfaction. At that moment, I couldn't hold back my laughter any longer. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a small metal object and held it up for them to see. My real police badge. The group fell into stunned silence. Karen took a hesitant step back, her eyes widening. The portly man clutched his plastic cuffs as if they were his only remaining weapon. I spoke in a calm, low voice. "Impersonating a police officer is a crime. Go ahead and try to arrest me. Let's see who ends up in handcuffs for real." Karen's face turned pale. The others murmured among themselves, a few of them slipping away quietly. This isn't over," Karen stammered, clinging to the last shred of her authority. I watched as she and her so-called officers retreated toward the street, disappearing around the corner. With a sigh, I picked up my now lukewarm coffee and took a sip. I had a feeling this was only the beginning. I had known for a long time that the HOA in this neighborhood was terrible, but the next morning, they proved they were even worse than I had imagined. When I opened the door to get the newspaper, the only thing waiting for me was a letter taped to my wooden door. "Notice of serious violation." The bold red capital letters made me frown. I ripped the paper off the door and unfolded it to read the contents inside. "You have violated the following HOA regulations *, placing your trash bin in an unauthorized location, refusing to attend the mandatory HOA meeting, displaying a hostile attitude toward HOA members, threatening the HOA board. Penalties *. Your trash collection service will be suspended until compliance. You are prohibited from parking in your own garage until you attend the HOA meeting. Continued noncompliance may result in eviction from the neighborhood." I laughed out loud. A self-appointed private organization thought they had the authority to ban me from using my own garage, and eviction from the neighborhood sounded like some medieval exile sentence. I crumpled the paper, tossed it into the trash, and turned to head back inside. But that's when I noticed something. My trash bin was missing. I froze for a moment, then stepped outside to scan the area. My neighbors' bins were all still in place. Only mine had vanished. So, they're playing this game now, I muttered. I pulled out my phone and called the local police station. When the dispatcher picked up, I kept my voice calm. "Hi, I'd like to report a theft. Someone stole my trash bin." There was a brief silence before the officer on the other end responded, sounding a bit confused. "You mean a plastic trash bin for garbage?" "Yes. Are you sure it was stolen and not just blown away by the wind or taken by the garbage truck by mistake?" I sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm sure, and I even have a list of suspects." I briefly explained the situation with the HOA and our confrontation from the previous day. The officer chuckled. "I've heard a lot about HOAs, but this is the first time someone's reported a stolen trash bin. Do you want us to come investigate?" I considered it for a moment before shaking my head, even though the officer couldn't see me. "No need. I think I'll handle this myself." After hanging up, I decided to do a little scouting around. About 3 houses down, I found exactly what I was looking for. My trash bin, with my house number 147 neatly labeled on the side, was sitting proudly in Karen's front yard. I wasn't surprised. I walked up and knocked on the door. A moment later, Karen appeared, arms crossed as if she had been expecting this confrontation. "Is there a problem, sir?" Her voice was sickeningly sweet. I pointed at the trash bin behind her. "Care to explain why my bin is in your yard?" Karen glanced back, pretending to be surprised. "Oh dear, how did that get here? Perhaps the garbage collectors misplaced it. But no worries, according to HOA regulations, you've lost your right to use a trash bin. So I think it's best to just leave it here." She smiled triumphantly. I stepped forward without another word and grabbed the bin. "I'm taking it back. If you steal anything else from my property, I'll call the real police. Not your little HOA enforcers." Karen clenched her jaw, but I didn't care. I rolled my bin back to my house, placed it in its usual spot, and went inside, shutting the door behind me. I thought that would be the end of it, but I had underestimated the HOA's persistence. The next morning, when I stepped outside, a brand new sign had been posted right in front of my garage door. "This garage has been sealed by the HOA. Use is prohibited." I stared at the sign, then glanced around. A few feet away, 2 of Karen's minions, the fat guy with the notebook and a petite red-haired woman, were peeking at me from behind a bush, watching intently. I sighed, shook my head, then walked over, picked up the sign, and tossed it straight into the trash. The fat guy's jaw dropped, and the redhead furiously pulled out her phone as if to record me. Karen appeared almost instantly, her face flushed with anger. "You're vandalizing HOA property." I crossed my arms, looking her straight in the eye. "Whose property is that sign?" Karen blinked, caught off guard for a second. "It belongs to the HOA. So it's not mine?" "Of course not." I smirked. "Good. That means it has no right to be on my property without my permission." Karen clenched her teeth. The redhead was still recording, but I didn't care. I turned around and walked back into my house, leaving the HOA fuming outside. I was beginning to realize something. The HOA wasn't just a group of control freaks. They actually believed they had real power. And that's why I knew this wasn't over yet. I knew that the HOA wouldn't let this slide easily. But I didn't expect them to retaliate so quickly. The next morning, when I woke up and pulled back the curtains, I saw something that made me freeze. My front yard had been decorated like a public waste disposal site. They had dumped piles of black garbage bags right on my porch. Not just 1 or 2 bags. An entire mini landfill ***. The stench hit me the moment I opened the door. Flies buzzed around the trash, and I even saw a stray cat digging into a torn plastic bag. Right next to the mess was a brand new sign, written in the same signature bright red letters. Warning, violation area. This will be the HOA's designated trash site until you comply with regulations. I clenched my fists. Karen. No one else could have come up with something this petty and disgusting. I stormed outside, kicking a trash bag out of the way, and looked around. As expected, Karen and her little entourage were standing across the street, arms crossed, smirking at me. The chubby guy with the clipboard stood next to her, chewing gum while raising an eyebrow at my reaction. Do you see the consequences of not following the HOA's rules? Karen spoke, her voice sickly sweet yet condescending. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Do you realize that illegally dumping trash in front of someone's house is a punishable offense? Karen shrugged. You no longer have access to waste collection services, so we're simply helping you utilize your space efficiently. I raised an eyebrow. Did you just admit to doing this? She hesitated for a split second before smirking. You have no proof, and if you call the cops, I'm sure we can justify this as part of the HOA's violation enforcement procedures. I narrowed my eyes. All right, if the HOA wanted to play dirty, I had no problem getting my hands dirty too. I stepped back inside and slammed the door. But instead of cleaning up the mess immediately, I waited. When night fell and the streetlights flickered on, I made my move. Wearing gloves and a face mask, I quietly dragged each garbage bag across the street, right in front of Karen's house, one by one. I stacked them neatly, forming a small wall of trash that completely blocked her front entrance. Then, I pulled out my phone and sent an anonymous email to the local health department, reporting a household in the neighborhood illegally dumping trash and creating an unsanitary environment. Of course, I attached a few photos as evidence, but only after the trash was in Karen's yard. Satisfied, I went back inside and had the best night's sleep in days. The next morning, Karen's furious screaming woke me up. I stepped outside, rubbing my eyes as if I had just woken up, pretending to be surprised at the pile of garbage in front of her house. Karen stood there, face red with rage, pointing an accusing finger at me. You did this. I blinked innocently. What? Oh wow. Looks like someone turned your house into a dump site. She gritted her teeth, about to snap. But before she could say anything, a health department vehicle pulled up. 2 uniformed inspectors stepped out, glanced around, then walked up to Karen. Good morning, ma'am. We received a report about illegal waste disposal here. Karen froze. What? This isn't my trash. It was him. The inspector cut her off. We have photographic evidence showing that this garbage has been here since last night. Unless you can prove that it belongs to someone else, you will be fined for violating sanitation regulations. I crossed my arms, enjoying the rare moment when Karen had no comeback. She turned to me, eyes blazing with fury. I simply smirked. Rules are rules, aren't they, Karen? She could do nothing but begrudgingly accept the citation. But I knew this game was far from over. I thought that, after the garbage incident, Karen would back off for a while to recover. But no, she wasn't the type to give up easily. The next morning, I woke up to something even crazier. Right in front of my house, a huge sign had been put up, with bold red letters stating, "No parking in front of this house. Severe HOA violation." And right below it, in smaller but equally ridiculous print, "This area is now under HOA control. Any unauthorized parking will be penalized." I blinked, looking around. No sign of the HOA squad, but I knew for sure they had done this overnight. Shaking my head, I walked up to the sign, grabbed it, and tossed it straight into the trash. Karen appeared instantly. She stepped out from behind a nearby bush, clearly waiting to see my reaction. "You just made a huge mistake, Chief." Karen emphasized the last word mockingly. I crossed my arms. "You put up an unauthorized sign in front of my house, and now you're lecturing me about rules?" She smirked. "This is an official HOA sign. You have no right to remove it without the board's approval." I scoffed. "And the HOA has no right to ban parking on a public street." Karen snapped her fingers. I glanced over and saw two of her goons approaching, one of them being the fat guy with the notebook, the same one who previously tried to handcuff me with plastic ties. This time, he had no handcuffs but was holding a bright blue toy walkie-talkie instead. "Commander, the suspect has removed the sign. Should we escalate enforcement?" The fat guy asked, his voice comically serious. Karen nodded. "Proceed with HOA violation enforcement." The fat guy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a yellow ticket, which he then solemnly stuck to my door. I glanced at the text. HOA citation notice. This homeowner has violated regulations and will face a monetary penalty. Fine, $500. Deadline, 48 hours. I narrowed my eyes. "You think I'm going to pay this fake fine?" Karen shrugged. "If you don't, the HOA has the right to impose additional penalties." I smirked. "Oh yeah? I'd love to see what that looks like." Karen gave me a cold smile before turning on her heel and walking away, her lackeys following behind. I ripped up the citation on my doorstep, but I knew the HOA wasn't done yet. ##### the HOA's revenge plan. That afternoon, I was working when I heard the sound of heavy engines outside. Looking out the window, I saw a construction crew pulling up in front of my house. A man in a reflective vest stepped out, holding a clipboard and scanning the area. I walked out, arms crossed. "What are you guys doing here?" The man looked at me, then down at his paperwork. "We were hired by the HOA to repair the neighborhood drainage system. According to the order, the worksite is right in your front yard." I raised an eyebrow. "Who authorized this?" The man flipped his clipboard and pointed to the signature line. "No surprise there, Karen." I sighed and pulled out my wallet, flashing my police badge in front of him. "I'm the town's chief of police. I never approved any excavation on my property. If you start digging without my consent, that will be considered trespassing." The man blinked. Then he turned back to his crew and signaled, "Pack it up. We're leaving." Karen appeared the moment they started pulling away. "Stop. Why are you leaving?" The construction worker shrugged. "Homeowner didn't approve. We can't proceed without legal consent." Karen glared at me, her face turning red with rage. I simply shrugged, throwing her own words back at her. "Rules are rules, right, Karen?" She was too furious to speak and stormed off. But I knew one thing for sure. Karen didn't know what fear was, and this war between me and the HOA was far from over. After the construction crew was driven away, I thought Karen would realize she was messing with the wrong person. But it turned out I had overestimated her. She didn't back down. She didn't stop. She only became more unhinged. I had just stepped outside to grab my morning newspaper when I saw a new HOA letter lying right on my doorstep. I sighed, picked it up, and opened it. Asterisk, our community is under threat from an individual who refuses to follow regulations, continuously defies our rules, and endangers our collective safety. Therefore, the HOA board will hold an emergency meeting tonight to discuss how to handle this issue. Asterisk. Asterisk, attendance of all residents is mandatory. Asterisk. I scoffed. Asterisk, endangering our collective safety? Asterisk. What had I done? Dared to oppose their antics? Stopped an illegal excavation? I crumpled the letter and tossed it straight into the trash. But I knew one thing for sure. This meeting wasn't just about discussing policies. They were planning a new form of retaliation. And I was very curious to see what they would try next. That evening, I decided to attend the meeting. Not because I was required to, but because I wanted to see firsthand what tricks Karen had up her sleeve this time. The neighborhood hall was packed. Most of the residents were present, sitting in rows of plastic chairs. On the small stage at the front, Karen stood there, looking every bit like a politician about to deliver an important speech. Beside her were her two usual lackeys, the overweight guy with the notebook and the scrawny one with the toy walkie-talkie. Karen cleared her throat and grabbed the microphone. "Dear esteemed residents of our community," she began solemnly, "we are facing a serious issue." I crossed my arms, leaning against the wall, listening. A certain individual, I won't name names, has repeatedly defied the HOA, disrupted our regulations, and even threatened members of this board. I nearly laughed. We cannot let our neighborhood fall into chaos. If we don't take action now, this person will continue to disrupt the peace of our community. Murmurs spread through the crowd. An elderly woman in the front row timidly raised her hand. But isn't he just living his life? Karen squinted. Absolutely not. This person has violated multiple rules. Removing HOA signs, refusing to pay fines, resisting the renovation order, and, worst of all, refusing to attend HOA meetings. The elderly woman shrugged. I don't attend HOA meetings either. Is that a problem? Karen pressed her lips together, clearly irritated at being challenged during her own meeting. We need a solution. She pressed on, ignoring the objection. Therefore, I propose an emergency measure. The HOA will officially vote to expel this individual from our neighborhood. Silence filled the room. Karen raised her hand. All in favor? A few hesitant hands went up, but most of the residents looked confused and uncomfortable. A man stood up. Karen, this isn't a dictatorship. You can't force people to agree with you. Karen gritted her teeth. Then what do you propose? We can't let this person keep running rampant. I decided it was time to speak. I stepped forward from the corner of the room, my voice calm but firm. I have a proposal. All eyes turned to me. Karen narrowed her gaze. You are not allowed to speak. This is an HOA meeting. I shrugged. Oh, really? Do I need to show my HOA membership card to talk? A few residents chuckled. Karen's face darkened. I continued. You claim I violated HOA rules? Fine. Let's try something simple. Why don't you cite the specific rule in the HOA bylaws that allows you to expel a resident? Karen opened her mouth to say something but then stopped. She glanced at her two lackeys. Find that rule, she muttered. The two men frantically flipped through their notes, but it was obvious. No such rule existed. I smirked. Can't find it. Karen clenched her fists. You're disrupting our meeting. I crossed my arms. Not at all. I'm simply helping everyone realize that the HOA doesn't have absolute power like you think it does. Another man spoke up. Karen, he's right. You can't just make up rules and force everyone to follow them. A middle-aged woman nodded. I agree. Lately, the HOA has been controlling everything too much. I can't even remember the last time we were actually free to make our own decisions in this neighborhood. The room started buzzing. More and more residents voiced their agreement. Karen looked around in a panic, clearly realizing she was losing control. I simply shrugged, offering her a knowing smile. This is just the beginning, Karen. After the disastrous meeting, I was certain that Karen wouldn't give up. And I was right. The next morning, I received a report from a colleague. Someone called the police, reporting that there was an individual carrying an illegal firearm in your neighborhood. I frowned. Who made the report? A woman. She refused to give her name. I chuckled. I didn't even have to think to know who was behind this. Karen. After failing at the meeting, she was trying a different tactic. Calling the police to bring me down. But there was one problem. I am the police. And if she thought she could play this game with me, she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. I stood at my doorstep, looking at the police car parked in my driveway. Two officers stepped out, their faces serious but slightly hesitant when they saw me. I recognized one of them, Williams, an old colleague I had worked with a few years ago. Williams raised an eyebrow. So the person we were called to investigate for possessing an illegal firearm is you? I crossed my arms and smirked. Exactly. And do you know who reported it? Williams sighed. We can't disclose the caller's identity, but you and I both know who it is. I laughed. So, what are you gonna do? Cuff me? Williams shook his head. You're a retired officer. I'm not stupid enough to do that, but we have to follow protocol. We need to search your house. I stepped aside, gesturing toward the open door. Be my guest. Williams and the younger officer with him began searching my home. They checked every corner, opened cabinets, and inspected the garage. But there was one thing Karen hadn't accounted for. I didn't keep any firearms here. After retiring, I had transferred all my weapons to a secure location as per regulations. So after a thorough search, Williams sighed and shrugged. Nothing here. I smirked. Want to dig up my backyard? Maybe I buried something. Williams chuckled and shook his head. Come on, don't mess with me. I know you wouldn't do that. But rules are rules, we had to check. I nodded. So what are you putting in your report? Williams smirked. No evidence found. But I'll be adding another note. Possible false report. I laughed. Good. Hopefully. That pisses Karen off. Williams burst into laughter. Oh, it definitely will. But be careful, my friend. She doesn't seem like the type to back down easily. I know. I nodded. And I already have a plan for my next move. Williams raised an eyebrow. Should I be worried? I just smiled. I knew Karen wouldn't stop. After the police search, she would surely try something else. So I decided to strike first. I spent the entire afternoon gathering documents. HOA records, unreasonable fees, instances where residents had been unlawfully pressured by the HOA. Then I called a lawyer friend. I have a lawsuit against the HOA. A deep voice responded on the other end. I like the sound of that. What did they do? Tried to force me out of the neighborhood, abused their power, threatened residents, collected illegal fees. Do you have evidence? I glanced at the thick stack of documents on my desk and smirked. Plenty. Then let's play. That night, I didn't wait for Karen to attack first. I went straight to the HOA meeting and confronted her in her own den. Karen was on stage, about to give a speech about serious issues in the neighborhood. I walked in carrying a thick folder of documents. Karen, I have some questions for you. The room fell silent. Karen narrowed her eyes. You have no right to speak. I held up the documents. But I have the law on my side. She went pale. I opened one of the documents and read aloud. According to state regulations, the HOA cannot impose arbitrary maintenance fees without resident approval. So why have you been fining people who didn't violate any rules? Karen stammered. I was just following protocol. What protocol? Can you show it to us? Karen had nothing to say. I continued. Furthermore, I have proof that you deliberately filed a false police report. That is a criminal offense. Her face turned ghostly white. A resident stood up. Is that true? I nodded. I spoke to the police. They will be investigating the HOA. Murmurs spread across the room. Several residents looked visibly angry. A man stood up and spoke loudly. Karen, we've had enough. You can't keep controlling us like this. A woman shouted. We need a vote. The HOA cannot continue to operate like this. Karen panicked. Everyone, please calm down. I did everything for the good of this neighborhood. But no one was listening to her anymore. ###. The HOA meeting ended in chaos. But I knew one thing. Karen had lost. Within a week, a vote took place. Karen was officially removed from the HOA by the residents. Not only that, but an official police investigation began into the shady activities of the HOA. She thought she could control everything forever. But she forgot one thing. Justice always finds a way to prevail. That night, I sat on my porch, sipping a glass of whiskey, watching the neighborhood, now more peaceful than ever. Karen was gone. The HOA was no longer a dictatorship. I smiled, and I knew I had just reclaimed my true freedom. ### lessons and takeaways from the story. ###1. Justice always prevails ***. No matter how powerful or cunning a corrupt individual may be, the truth will come to light if there is enough evidence and determination. Karen abused her power and manipulated the residents, but in the end, she was overthrown by those who stood up for justice. ###2. Don't let injustice control you ***. The protagonist refused to submit to unfair rules and HOA oppression. Instead, he actively gathered evidence and used legal knowledge to fight back. This highlights the importance of resisting injustice rather than accepting it in silence. ####3. Knowledge and preparation are the most powerful weapons. The protagonist didn't just resist with words. He had solid legal proof to take Karen down. This underscores the importance of understanding your rights and being well prepared before taking action. ###4. Unity is strength. One individual alone may struggle against a corrupt system, but when people come together, change is possible. The collective will of the residents was what ultimately removed Karen and restored the HOA to its rightful purpose. ###5. Wrongdoers always face consequences. Karen believed she could control the neighborhood forever, but in the end, she was taken down by the very people she had oppressed. This reflects the universal truth of karma. Unethical behavior will eventually lead to downfall. ###conclusion. This story is a lesson in perseverance, courage, and integrity. It reminds us that no matter the circumstances, we should never let the wrongdoers win. With enough determination and preparation, we can reclaim justice, not just for ourselves, but for our entire community.